Hello, welcome to episode 2 of the book set Completionist. My name is Tom. Today I'm going to talk about mythology, both in the book set reveal and in the book reviews. And today I will be reviewing 4 books on mythology. Yes, I like mythology. Mythology is one of the driving forces behind many other works of fiction. Even in modern works, we still see a lot of references to things from Greek mythology and Norse mythology, of course. So I think it's an interesting genre to read. You know, the OG stuff like the Greek myths, which I will talk about today. And the book set reveal is also a part of that. So what do we have here? 2 books in this set, which makes it a duology. 2 books in this set is called a duology. Okay. These books were published in 1958 and 1962. That makes them pretty old. I have not read them, but I'm going to soon. The author of these books was a woman. Her name was Mary Renault. And the genre is mythology, or you might want to call it historical fiction. Some of these myths were actually based on real life events, actual history. Now, this particular story might not really have happened because it talks about some magical creatures. For instance, the Minotaur. The Minotaur was a mythical beast which was half bull and half man. And the main character in these books is going to kill it. Okay. So for those of you who know a little bit about Greek mythology, then you will guess what this is about. Just let me just reveal it. Take this off. Yeah. And here it is. A 2-part set about Theseus. Theseus was the guy who killed the Minotaur. Book 1 is called The King Must Die, and book 2, The Bull from the Sea. Okay, here is the set. Let's focus on the first book. The King Must Die. Yeah, this must be one of the smallest books I own. Yeah, it's pretty small format. It's old, from the 1960s. Funnily, there is advertisement even in the book. Stuck in there is a card for Time magazine. Okay, you don't see that anymore. The King Must Die. Part 1. Part 2. The Bull from the Sea. This is much larger. However, I think the text is also bigger. The bigger text makes a bigger book, not necessarily a longer book. And the original book itself looks pretty good. I would say it looks better without the dust jacket. About that? Look at this. Pretty neat. This looks old. I like stuff that looks old. There's a nice map right on the first page, and also at the end of the book. This is the same map. So whenever you're reading at the end, you could just move here and look at the map. If you're still reading at the start, you could move to this map. Okay, and 1962 over here. The first book review of today's video is about Edith Hamilton's Mythology, Timeless Tales of Gods and Heroes. This book was published in 1942. Despite its more modern cover, it is actually a pretty old book. 1942. What is this book about? Mythology? Yes, of course. This book tries to inform the reader of basically all the most popular Greek myths and their characters, which is a lot, because there are many myths. Now, so why should anybody want to read this book? Because it gives you an overview of all the myths in just one volume, and that could be useful to those who want to know about Greek mythology. But is it a good book to read? I can say that I did not really enjoy it, because there is just so much of it. There are numerous myths, and not all of them are that interesting. Also, there are so many names in here that it's hard to keep track of who is in what myth. Now, that might be my problem, but I still think that takes away a bit of the joy. It just blends into a big mass of names and stories that, to be honest, aren't even that great. Why not then? Why is it not that great? Now, because the stories are just a bit silly. There are gods in there who can just do whatever they want at any moment that they want, and there's no suspense. We always know that the hero wins in the end. On top of that, the Miss Hamilton here just takes the myths and puts them down in a very dry fashion. She doesn't add any dialogue, for example, if there isn't any. She doesn't adapt these myths into something that could be considered a narrative. It's just characters, they did this, they went there, this happened. There isn't a story. It's just like the bare bones of each story, but none of the, like what we know in novels. We want to have an introduction, some climax, some build-up, resolution, but that doesn't happen in these tellings of the myths. Is just very dry, and yeah, you just think, okay, fine, I've read one myth, I know the characters, moving on to the next. But then that's where you get confused, because if you do that, if you read everything like I did, then it all becomes a big blend of names that don't stick. Okay, now let me give you an example of some of the myths here. Just to show you the silliness of it all. Like, we all know the story of, what's his name? Perseus, right? Perseus was a hero. He wanted to kill the Gorgon called Medusa. Medusa was that creature with the snakes for hair, and whenever you looked at her, you would turn into stone. Seems like a pretty overpowered monster, right? Enemy. But of course, Perseus had help from the gods. So the gods gave him shoes with wings on it, and they gave him a bag in which he could hide the head once he had cut it off. Magic bag, no less. Also, they gave him a big shield made of bronze that was very shiny, that he could use as a mirror, so that he would not have to look at Medusa directly, but could do so just from the reflection of his own shield, which would not activate Medusa's power and would not turn him into stone. And on top of it all, when he actually found Medusa, she was asleep. So all he had to do was hover over on his flying shoes and chop off the head before the other sisters woke up, because Medusa was actually part of like triplets. There were two others who also didn't really, enjoy being killed. Anyway, so Perseus cut off the head of Medusa, put it in a bag, and that's it. He won because he got help. Right? There's nothing hard about anything when you get the help of gods. So, a bit silly. In here is also the story of Theseus, and Theseus is the main character of the book set that I have just revealed, so I'm not going to talk much about that. Another one that I would like to share is also a bit silly, the story of Atalanta. This is not a very well-known goddess character, but Atalanta was a woman who was known for her speed and skill in hunting, and everybody wanted to marry her, but she didn't want to accept anybody's suit. So her father did push her a bit, say, hey man, you got to get married. Okay, so Atalanta said, okay, I will marry anybody who can beat me in a foot race. And many tried, but they all lost. Atalanta was an expert runner, and so nobody was able to make her his bride. Until one guy, I forgot his name, but it's not important, one guy came up with a trick. What did he do? He found from the gods some apples, magic golden apples, that anybody who saw these apples would be so amazed with them that they would drop everything and try to get them, right? Very desirable apples. And so that's what this man did. Now at some point he started the race with Atalanta, and he dropped the apples because Atalanta was way too fast for him, but you know, he had to do something. So he tossed those apples in front of her, and Atalanta was like fixated with them. Like, whoa, apples. All right, got some apples. So she took an apple and, oh gosh, the guy has run away from me. Chasing after him, the guy looking over his shoulder. Oh God, here she comes again. Oh, she's overtaking me. I better toss another magic apple in her way. Okay, you get the point. In the end, of course, he was able to beat Atalanta and make her his wife. I mean, what? Really? All right. And let me also tell you about Tantalus, because these myths are sometimes pretty gruesome. Tantalus was one of the earlier characters in mythology. He was closely related to the gods themselves, and he got it in his head that he was somehow better than his ancestors. So what he wanted to do is trick them, see if they could figure out some trick that he played on them, not just any trick. This Tantalus character, had a son, and he had an idea to feed his own son to the gods. So what he did is he killed his own son and he cut him into pieces, put those pieces into a stew, and then served the stew to the gods as he had invited them to come over for dinner. Yeah. Now the gods, of course, figured it out. They were not pleased, and they punished Tantalus by not just killing him, but by sending him to hell, hanging him on his arms, and keeping him alive forever while dangling food and water in front of him. And any time that he wanted to try and reach that food or water, it would magically move away from him. That, you know, that's a bit silly. I mean, killing your own kid just to prove a point to the gods, like, no, man, no. Now, the very last story I will talk about is the one of Oedipus. Oedipus was the guy who ended up marrying his own mother, killing his own father, while not knowing that these people were his parents. I think it's maybe the most famous story of them all. I'm not going to say everything, just this. It's in here. It's told in a very short way, not super engrossing. It's just like, okay, this happened, that happened. And it's not that fun. It's okay, it's informative. You will know everything about it. But does it entertain you? Probably it won't. Okay, so that's that one. The second book of today's video is also a book on Greek mythology called The Greek Myths 2 by Robert Graves. This book was published in the 50s, 1955, so around the same time as the first book, roughly. And this book is even worse when it comes to entertainment, because it doesn't entertain. This one also compiles all the myths in a very scholarly fashion, with even more names and more events than the previous book. And what this one also does is relate any element of the myths with something that might have happened in real history. Okay, so a lot of these myths supposedly were based on real life events, and then these events were embellished by the myth. So if there was a battle somewhere and there was an outcome, then a myth would be created around that battle with then an insertion of gods. Like, why did that particular side win? Well, because that side had favored the gods and the enemy had not, and so that's why they lost. This is a recurring theme. Also, what it does is it tries to relate the Greek myths with some mythology from other cultures and say this myth is exactly the same as, say, Celtic myths or myths from another Egyptian myths, right? So again, it is interesting, yeah, if you want to study this subject, sure. But as entertainment, no, don't read this if you want to be entertained. What this book in particular describes is the story of Hercules, or Heracles as he is known in this book. Heracles or Hercules is known in modern culture as this superhero, good guy. A Disney movie was made about him. But in mythology, Hercules was not such a great guy. He was super strong. Yeah, he was amazing in fighting. But he also had a very small brain, it seemed, because he was very violent. Anytime that anything didn't go his way, he would become super aggressive. And more than once, he kills people unintentionally. Like, he gets mad with some person, and you know what people do is like they push. But when Hercules pushes, the guy flies away and dies, cracks his head on a rock. And that happens a lot. And also, Hercules is a rapist. Anytime he meets any girl, he falls in love with her, wants to have babies with her, and you know, no matter what the girl wants, doesn't matter. In one of these small stories, there is the father of such a girl who says, "Yo, Hercules, no, you cannot have my daughter. You already have a wife, many wives, and you don't treat women very well, so please just get out of here." No, Hercules will not accept such defiance. So he kills that guy and rapes the girl, has a baby with her, of course, because all instances of rape lead to babies. Yeah, so if you have a positive image of Hercules, probably don't read this, because you will not like him anymore after reading it. Just that. Yeah, so do I recommend it? No. The third book in today's video is a more modern adaptation of one of the most famous myths of Greek history. That is the Iliad, which is a story that people know because it's the war between Greece and Troy, with the Trojan horse as probably the most famous element of that myth. Movies have been made, including one with Brad Pitt and Orlando Bloom in the early 2000s. That's actually a pretty cool movie. This one is called The Song of Achilles. Achilles is the main hero of that story. This book was written in 2011 by Madeline Miller, and this author is what she's doing is using a side character as the main point of view. This side character is called Patroclus. Patroclus was the companion of Achilles. Now, whether that was a romantic companion or just a BFF or just friends, that remains unclear. It's about what you want it to be. Madeline Miller here decides that Patroclus and Achilles are definitely lovers, and that she tells the story from how these two met as children, how they grew up together. They really spent their entire lives together. And at some point, this Trojan War happens and they need to go there, and Achilles needs to be like the top dog, and stuff happens. Now, if you're familiar with the story, you know how it ends, but I won't spoil it. I mean, how to spoil something that's 1,000 years old, more 3,000 years old. Everybody knows it, but if you don't, all right, go in it blank, up to you. Is it good? Yeah, I think it was. It was okay. Now, I already knew the Iliad, I knew the ending, I knew all the characters, so for me it was a very easy read. But if you're completely unaware of any of these stories and characters, yeah, you might have heard of Achilles, Apollo. I mean, Apollo is one of those gods. Yeah, then you just, it rings a bell somewhere, like, oh yeah, that name, I've heard of that name. But it's okay, even if you don't know anything about it, you will maybe feel a bit confused. There are a number of characters in here that all have difficult names. Not all of them are that important, but I think still the story is strong. It's quite personal. Like I said, in the other books, it's very impersonal. It's just a factual listing of events, of characters, that doesn't feel like, oh, I'm reading a novel. This is one of those novels, a novelization of a myth with our modern standards of storytelling, of character development. So this is much better. I like this more than the other two. But okay, it takes a point of view from a romantic perspective that I personally don't enjoy. I don't like books that have heavy romance elements in them. So I thought it was a bit sappy at times, like, oh my gosh, Achilles, your lips are so moist and your feet are pink and you smell like flowers. That sort of thing is in there. It is not a lot. You can ignore that and still have a good time with it. But yeah, the controversy is probably that Achilles is gay in this book, and not everybody likes that. Well, who cares, right? I'm okay with that. It's just a story. Everybody is free to write and adapt any kind of public work. I mean, there's no copyright on Greek myths. You can change it. You can write whatever you can write whatever you want about it, and that's what she did. Was nice. I can recommend it. Okay. Song of Achilles. Yeah, talking about the Iliad, huh? The fourth book is called the Iliad, but it's a graphic novel adaptation. This was made by Gareth Hinds in 2019, and it's a graphic novel. What is a graphic novel? If you are unfamiliar with that term, a graphic novel is basically a comic book, but with a lot more text in it. And I have to say, this book really, really helped me in understanding the Iliad. Before I read this, I had no real idea what it was about. After reading this, it all became a lot clearer, and it helped me a lot in reading the previous book. Even I read this, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago. I will show you the book on the table because I think you should see some of the illustrations in here. It's nice. but it is, to my opinion, more geared towards young adults or even teenagers. The illustrations are a little bit like childish at times, so I didn't enjoy it that much. I didn't appreciate it as, you know, a sort of a tool for helping me understand the Iliad, because the original form of the Iliad is a poem that's really, really long that nobody really wants to read like that. So in that sense, it's good that somebody takes it upon themselves to make it more accessible to people who don't like poetry. So let me show you some of the illustrations in here. Let's look at the graphic novel of the Iliad. It looks very nice. Good. Oh yeah, this is what I liked about this story. I mean, about this adaptation, is that the artist also makes it easier for the reader to follow who is who. He's introducing all the characters, and he's been nice enough to also color code them. The red ones over here are all of the Greeks, and the blue ones are the Trojans, so that you can easily identify them when they're fighting, which of course they will do a lot. Yeah, also. So you see all these guys are blue, they're the Trojans. This guy is red, so he's a Greek. And there it is. Now you might wonder, what's this then? Because this is a pinkish, completely pink. Well, these are the gods. Over here you see that there are gods playing part in this story, and the gods are portrayed as just completely color creatures. Okay, so that looks nice. My criticism of this is about the drawing style. It sometimes looks a little bit childish. And this is Zeus. Especially when they run, it looks a bit odd. Where's a picture of where they run? Raw! Sort of exclamations. Just makes it a little bit kiddie. But yeah, it's pretty gory too. There's a lot of blood in places, which is normal. Alright, he lost his head. Yeah. So be aware, it's not for the very young among us. And there's a lot of text in places too. So you need to be aware. And yeah, of course, the artist had the challenge of putting all the text into text balloons so that it would be manageable in this way of presenting the story, these panels. You know, he needs space to draw his characters and the actions, but also needs a lot of space to show the text. Right. But overall, I think it's a good one, good adaptation, and it will help those who want to get into the Iliad but don't have, who don't have the patience to read a 1,000-line poem. So this is good. Okay, that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next one, which will come soon. See ya!